And I remember when I left here on the 7th of October, it's going to be a long time till we meet again. But it's been well worth the wait. As I've indicated this morning with a quick chat to Park, is very interested in his 3 papers in particular, which I think advance really what this committee should be doing on substantially. So before I even start the meeting, can I just, Rob, record my thanks to you and your staff for a great set of papers. It gives us a chance to really walk the talk, I think, as a committee, and I'm very grateful that we've got that start going, so that's superb. Recognising that we have Mr. Julian and his friends here to speak to us, can I just deal with the formal stuff in terms of apologies? I did speak to Sandra a week or 2 ago, and she indicated that she was not going to be here, so it looks like we've got a full muster, so I'd like to move that we sustain Sandra's apology to the thank you, Murray. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Right, Julian has requested appropriately, and I've agreed to enable Mr. Julian, and I think it's Steve as well, to talk to us about the matters that concern him. So, Ron, I invite you, Steve, particularly to come forward. There might be 2 chairs there. I'm sure we can find a second chair for you. Come forward and address, please. We indicated the time commitment and impressions we have. If you could keep to that, I would appreciate that. I've also just reminded the council the laws, Ron, that at the end of that, they're open to questions of clarification and fact from you and Steve, and we will take the time to take to deal with those questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce. Happy to sit or do I stand?
No, sit, mate, it's fine.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. My name is Ron Julian. My professional background is in strategic asset management, value management, project management, and cost management on significant institutional, public and private sector projects. So this presentation is a brief chronology and commentary on the application of separately used and inhabited portions, parts to campsites and Riverbank Holiday Park. I'm currently referencing to Te Pura Holiday Park as one informs the other because the staff report benchmarks to Te Pura. Full details of the operation is found in TCDC files. Am I speaking loud enough?
No, a little bit more, please.
A little bit more? I pioneered the shared ownership schemes relevant to Mercury Bay Holiday Park and Te Pura Holiday Park, purchasing in 2007 and 2005 respectively. At the time, I was concerned at the prospect that these campgrounds would likely fall victim to developers and the land used for other purposes. I've seen this happening with other campgrounds in the Coromandel and other places around New Zealand. The alternative land value for campgrounds was likely to be higher than its use as a campground. My legacy and goal was to find an innovative way to preserve and future-proof them. In Māori, ka muri means walking backwards into the future, essentially looking to the past to inform the future and allowing ourselves to be guided by those who have gone before us and what they have learned on the way. This made sense to me. I look back at Māori values of shared land use and overlaid European principles of title law, putting ownership in the hands of many, thereby diffusing the land value and by consequence preserving and future-proofing the survival of campgrounds for our tamariki, mapapuna and future katiaki. The process involved financial modelling of operating costs and upgrade investment. Discussions were had with council planners to implement a management plan and ratify existing land use consents to continuous camping grounds. Council were aware of my intentions from the outset. Rates were a modest but important component of my financial modelling. There were no warning bells from council of what lay ahead. Titles were created and sold out initially to long-term campers, then others. Titles were for undivided shares, not subdivided sections. No land subdivision has occurred. All owners' names would appear on the head title for the land, and consequently each name recorded in TCDC's rating information database as transfer notices came through. Each owner's undivided share recorded as an exclusive right of use of a campsite. The rates section of council saw a bundle of titles transfers come through at the same time and jumped to the conclusion that a subdivision had somehow occurred without council knowledge or approval. That can be the only explanation for what then occurred. It is usual that following council approvals of subdivisions, the issue of titles transfer notices issued. That is where the misunderstanding began. Unfortunately, no one from council saw it appropriate to make contact, consult, ask clarification or explanation. They launched into what I call attack mode. This was when the phrase subdivisions through the back door was born. The myth still permeating within council 15 years later. I've had to carry the derogatory connotations of stigma ever since, which has strained council relations, reflected yet again in the staff report today. The CEO at the time should have stepped in and corrected things, but did not. Nothing illegal whatsoever has been done. Rather, something new, innovative and clever for the mutual benefit of people and community. The whole point was to retain unchanged use of the property as a campground, yet once we had achieved all our consents and approvals from TCDC and began selling down underwrite shares, TCDC decided to rate the property if its use had fundamentally changed. Of course, that then led to actions on the part of council to rate the new scheme as if it was a comprehensive subdivision. No amount of explanation has helped through the 3 CEOs, 3 mayors, numerous councillors and countless rollover. I don't believe it was a premeditated move by TCC from the outset, just an unfortunate series of circumstances and which progressively fed on each other, but the wheels were set in motion with positions and perceptions becoming entrenched. Various rating methodologies were tried and withdrawn. First off, council treated the scheme as a comprehensive subdivision with separate sections, set rating notices to each title holder. The valuer general stepped in and said, no, you can't do that. Those were withdrawn. I'm skipping through a little bit here. We went through 3 further iterations with applications of issue IPs, progressively withdrawn until this final rating methodology with issue IPs per owner is the model that council has settled on and applied selectively and somewhat inconsistently since 2007. For council staff to now say TCDC stance has always been consistent regarding issue of these charges is obviously completely inconsistent with this history. Why could a regional council, interestingly, often not follow TCDC's lead? Consequently, this issue IP rating burden shifted from the modest input in my original financial modelling to an extremely significant burden on each owner in the campground. Rates originally calculated 5% of operating costs ballooned to over 50%, with potential to increase further as more came on board. Over the entire period, owners received no additional levels of service from TCD, nor required any for the huge SRP burden now imposed upon them. Nor were owners able to use their site for any other purpose that they had always used as campsites, because critically the management plan approved by TCDC, in order for the scheme to be given the green light, continue the historical use of the campground as a holiday park as a campground for short stay holiday accommodation, and all of the tenant restrictions, including complete prohibition of being able to reside permanently in the holiday park, still applies today. Unfortunately, however, whilst it's a matter of fact and law, the historical use has not changed. An ongoing misconception by council means that we are now rated as if we had changed. We have bizarre situations where we have adjacent campsites with different cost structures that influences those owners. It's not the level playing field enjoyed by the vast majority of campgrounds. Even more bizarre is the issue of burden imposed on a 100 square metre campsite in the campground is the same as a 700 or 800 square metre residential property next door who have right of permanent residence, unlike the campsite which is limited to casual stay. An affidavit from TCDC's previous in-house solicitor, Mr. Paul Davies, affirmed by him in April 2016, created serious problems for us to deal with internally, amongst some owners leading to lengthy arbitrations and judicial proceedings. Some of you are aware of the affidavit have copies. Mr. Davies falsely claimed to represent TCDC's stance, and the quotes are there. The council sued during incumbents because they were a ratepayer, and the council did not sue local authorities because they were not ratepayers. This statement was legally and factually incorrect and proved to be so in cross-examination by Mr. Davies during arbitration proceedings. Mr. Davies had no answer why all the names were recorded in the grid and DVR other than to blame administrative oversight. The CEO at the time should have stepped in again, but corrected the snowballing situation, but did not. I attach an arbitrator's award and the various clauses. And there, the relevant clauses, clause 34 is from the rates personnel at the time that said declaration against all owners, and 77-78 about Mr. Davies' era. Of course, the ratepayer is the person or persons listed on the title, and by law, all names are recorded in the RID and DVR in accordance with rating law. Yet this continues to conflict with the position adopted in emails from PCD and in today's staff report. We refer to the Local Government Act, owner means a person, and I really subscribe down there what the episodes from the Rating Act. There is obviously no doubt that all the names listed on the title and recorded in the written regard and appearing in TCD's rating notices, and as far as the placements on the form, are the owners and ratepayer. Once the council staff grasp and accept this obvious error in their approach, their position is set out in their report and underlying previous actions fall away. Angry owners' interests wrongly to believe they were not ratepayers by Mr. Davis after they would took and continue to take their frustrations out on camp management about being levied. The SUIP definition has been progressively reworded to better capture us in the 10-year plans. Each time wording of the example became more specific and targeted. I quote your definition, I don't need to read that. Safe to say the examples listed that where SUIPs apply are generally 6 to 10 words, but the example that captures us is now granted 24 words with each time of tinkering. And then I go on to say, quote from your 2018-2028 long-term plan, Council identified some overarching principles important to be undertaken, being fair and equitable, and concerned about public's ability to pay raise. Council seeking to maintain affordability and predictability. SUIPs of $1,000 per campsite is unaffordable and was unpredictable. Council staff have a perception that Ron Julian is liable for the rates, even after proven by law and rating act to be incorrect. Of course, each person listed on the rating notice is equally and severally liable. Council staff only recently, for the first time since 2007, contacted other owners, advising the debt situation. Council still pursue me for the debt, going so far as to send debt collection notices to my mortgagee, as stated in the staff report. Under duress, I've paid these SUIP arrears, except the penalty charges, which we argue are incorrect anyway. I've been accused by council staff of not being open and honest with other owners. I assure you that all owners have been kept fully informed of this ongoing debacle with council. I might suggest that council staff have not been completely open and honest with councillors. It's easy to write policy and implementation in council language and get it through. All owners have been meeting and talking regularly and with council since 2007. To put my presentation in perspective, SUIPs have minimal impact on me personally, as I'm levied a single SUIP by having contiguous sites. Although there is this misconception within council that Ron Julian is solely liable for the SUIPs, of course all the owners in the property are jointly and severally liable. It's just that TCDC continuously target Ron Julian, even though I've paid $29,910.87 to TCDC to cover the SUIP arrears at that date. Mercury Bay Holiday Park has always paid a single SUIP and other rates on time, as the Australian has done. To prove Holiday Park conceded and settled its SUIP situation with TCDC in 2015, that decision was not a consent or admission that TCDC's position on SUIPs was or is correct. There were other drivers for that decision, as alluded to earlier in my presentation and in the attachment A. At the time, Mercury Bay Holiday Park was in a similar contract debt situation with TCDC, but were not pursued until last year, 2020. I think there was some internal reflection within council and things were put on hold. Of course, we're in reasonably constant dialogue with council. We're not arguing with TCDC's legal position as to whether they can or cannot impose SUIPs per se. Clearly, council's interpretation is permissible under TCDC's rating policy. The critical point is whether councillors are agreeable on an informed basis to SUIPs being levied selectively applied to some campsites in some campgrounds. But it isn't council's intention to levy SUIPs on every campsite and every campground in the future. Council are forcing upon our 12 owners to consider collapsing the model and subdividing the land into residential sections. Our neighbouring campground was recently purchased by a developer, and inevitably that will go. Our whole purpose in developing the scheme was the economic preservation of campgrounds for their limited historical use, as confirmed in a resource consent. Council's failure to recognise this and instead oppose rates as if a subdivision had occurred, allowing permanent residents in the campgrounds, is threatening again and impairing the survival of the campgrounds. That will leave Woodyange with no campgrounds other than freedom camping areas funded by council and benevolent landowners. Mercury Bay Holiday Park accommodates up to 500 guests per day during the long peak season, each bringing wealth into the township and community. The occupancy of the residential sections will be far less than that, should we subdivide. I might suggest an 8% reduction. The ownership model allows owners to rent their sites to the general public when they are not using them themselves, so they get some balancing off return for their internal fees they pay. But the SUIP additional cost factor significantly unbalanced and skews this opportunity, which provides no This dispels the incorrect start assumption of Ronjula as a separate commercial campground. In summary, we put a huge effort into developing a scheme that provides a sustainable economic model for campgrounds to continue to operate in New Zealand in the face of significantly increasing land prices and demand. And doing so, we went to exhaustive lengths by way of provisions of a camp management plan and consent maintain unchanged the use of the campground for temporary holiday stay accommodation. However, due to an early interpretation by Council, we have constantly been treated as a developer. The issue comes down to a simple but fundamental keyword: interpretation. Interpretation of a definition of how these should be applied. I'm sure councils will be totally unaware of how detrimental so many people's lives have been affected by CIPs.
Thank you, Mr. Gillian. You've done well. We do have your presentation in front of us, so I'm sure my members of the committee can also read the summary, which is essentially the point you've got to. I'm conscious that Steve, I think, wants to make some short comments as well in support. So could I invite you, Steve, to make it a restricted comment, please, to a reasonably short.
Yeah, my name is Steve West. I reside in Hamilton. I have been involved in the model up at Whitianga with a caravan site. Now, probably just covering on the SUIPs, the definition of that. On the 9th of October 2018, I attended the Hamilton City Council with all the councillors present and the CEO, Richard Briggs, who spoke about SUIPs and their interpretation of the lengths that SUIPs can be charged. Basically, they can charge every site, every campground, every backpackers, every motel, freedom camping, and down to every room and every house can be subject to an SUIP. So if you've got a 4-bedroom house, 2 living areas, 2 bathrooms, here's a bill for $10,000 SUIP plus rates. So that's the actual interpretation of SUIP. So that has to be quite clear. Now, what SUIP means for my caravan, I have to pay an SUIP of $1,000 a year. I've got a caravan, there's no toilet, no shower, it's just a caravan. Now, for me to pass on that cost of the SUIP, because mine's rented out, my caravan's rented out through the camp, and a good caravan would be rented out about 45 nights of the year, which would mean I have to charge an extra $20 plus just to pay for the SUIPs. I can't do that because the campground next door doesn't have to pay. In fact, the caravan next door to me doesn't have to pay on both sides, doesn't have to pay. So it's not a level playing field. I can't, it doesn't exist. It can't be done. Now, for the SUIPs, the council, I've read this here. This is your report dated the 11th of October 2021 in support of Mercury Bay paying SUIPs. Now, in this, they've used the SUIPs enforced on Te Puru Motor Camp. I actually can't think of a worse example. Has anybody here been to Te Puru Motor Camp and established the carnage has been caused by SUIPs? Well, you should. You should actually spend some time and actually find out what damage has been done. Of course, they've paid it. They've paid $220,000 because what's the option? You force them into bankruptcy. The reason I got involved in the campground is because I grew up as a kid. I went there as a kid with my mum and dad, went to campgrounds, and when my kids were little, took them to campgrounds, and even the summer just gone, took my grandchild to the campground, got another grandchild on the way during a couple of weeks, and that's why I'm involved in campgrounds, because I've enjoyed the time I've had. It's not a monetary thing, it's an enjoyment. Now, in 2008, or this in 2007 and 2008, before I got involved in it and bought my way in, I phoned up the council and asked them, and they said, no, we're not interested, nothing to do with that. I went along to a meeting similar to this over in Whitianga in 2008 and spoke to the councillors there because the SUIPs had just come to the service, and I was told, we're not interested in that. That's not our intention. But here we are, it certainly is the intention. When this idea was first started, other campgrounds got involved, and they sort of way of campgrounds to survive, because campgrounds at the moment aren't surviving. Simply, there's not enough money in campgrounds to do what they're doing, and their exit from campgrounds is to sell. They can sell land. Other businesses, they own land. A lot of them, they use McDonald's, for example, they own all of their land. They own a lot of real estate in New Zealand. Are they selling property in Queen Street? No. Their business pays for itself. They make money. Campgrounds are struggling. The money's not there. And this is why campgrounds are looking at alternatives to survive. Okay, it's not to make a lot of money. And when you put in, you know, here's a bill for $100 and something thousand, where do you think that money comes from?
Yeah, Steve.
Okay. Ron touched on the fact that the campgrounds are dissolving. Wangata is basically gone. Whitiaga is gone. I can see that Mercury Bay, what's going to happen there is they've got 3 different options what to do. They either continue with the model and have other owners come in to make it spot. That isn't going to work because the council's going to come along and just tax them, you know, $80,000 a year plus. So that doesn't work. Stay status quo, keep the same number of owners. That doesn't work. So the only option left is to actually fold it. Fold the model, subdivide the land, get your money back and get out of there. I'm sad for it because the whole purpose of why I got involved in the campgrounds is the enjoyment in my family and my kids and grandchildren. And I want people, or particularly young people, to continue to enjoy that. I want young families with their kids to go to campgrounds and still have an enjoyable holiday. Campgrounds are struggling, campgrounds are dissolving, and it's up to you guys, you councillors, it's your choice. Do you want them to survive or do you want them gone?
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's very clear for your summary. Appreciate that, Steve. Can I open the floor to my committee members? Do you have questions or clarification that you'd like to ask Steve or Ron, please? John.
Just a question for you, Steve. You mentioned the tarn that we've been up there and seen what had occurred. Do you want to give us your observation of what's occurred up there as a result of these CIPs?
Like you said in the report, they've had to pay out $220,000 or whatever, and then I think they're paying $50,000 a year. You know, this is on top of rates. Like I agree with paying rates. It's important everybody pays their way, but this is on top, and they get nothing else for it. You know, for their $50,000 or $60,000 a year, there's nothing provided from the council. It's just tax. What I have seen is people, because I've dealt with this, you know, people blame Ron for what has happened. They think that it's wrong that they pay SUIPs. They can't afford to pay it, and so they blame the messenger. And the council has forced Ron to collect it. And so, as they blame Ron, they're busy taking Ron to court and getting his judicator sort of making decisions on what's happening. And so there's a lot of in-house fighting, and they're blaming Ron when they really should be blaming the council.
Thank you. Any other questions for Steve or for Ron? Thank you. Appreciate it. It's a bit of a cattle race to get through it, Ron, but I appreciate that you have given us both your presentation and your support, Steve. Thank you for the clarity of your statements as well. As you're aware, we are discussing this in public expert later in the meeting, so it's been useful to have you folk here and your colleagues. Appreciate your presence this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Right, if I could move on with our agenda, please. I haven't been informed, or rather, I should really, are there any requests for matters that aren't on the agenda to be raised? I haven't received sort of any informal indication. Oh, sorry. Can I move that we just note we received public forum, Mr. Burley and Mr. West, and We'll let the minutes. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Sally. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Any items that matter with the agenda? I think it's a pretty good agenda, and I've accepted as much as I could, please. There are no items. We'll move on to any matters of interest that people need to raise with the matters at hand. Being none, we'll continue then on to item 1.6, which is confirmation of the minutes of the 7th of October. They're in your pack. I'd like to move, Chair, that we accept this as a record of that meeting. Are there any points of clarification, accuracy, etc. people would like to raise? Seemed like a long time ago. I read the minutes. It looked like when I was there, Chair. So, if that's the case, can I have a second, please, to my motion? It's true and correct record, please.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Terry. Can I put the motion in, please? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. That's great. Right. We'll move on to item 1, please, which is the audit report. I take it this is your item.
Carl
Oh, he's online as well. Oh, brilliant. Is any opening comments from you, Don and Carl? If you've got a few short points that you'd like to point us towards, I think that would be useful for the committee.
So this is a final report from last year's audit, our annual report. So if you can see there's a summary there, talks about during the audit, and then there's the recommendations on page 14 are the ones that audit had said are going to be done for yes, beneficial. So we've got some of the necessary categories, some of the beneficial, and also some urgent. So I'll probably just take it over to Carl, just to give a brief run through of the audit and what his findings were about.
Thank you, Donna. Carl, can't see you. So if you've got some comments to make, could you make them, please?
Thanks, Chair. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be as creative as yourself to have a alternative journey. All roads from Auckland did not lead to Thames-Coromandel. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Right. So I think last year was a tumultuous year with COVID-19 having a big impact, and as we can see, it still continues. With saying that, there was a big focus on TCDC's assessment of the impact on the financial statements as well as the disclosure, and we spent some additional time looking at that. From as can be seen in the introductory page, I would say on page 13 of the board pack, we were satisfied with the disclosure that TCDC made in this regard. And we also just included an emphasis of matter paragraph in this regard to draw the user's attention to what was said in the financial statements. From the recommendations, we've included the 3 new recommendations, as Donna said. One of them, the beneficial one on the CE's report, we'll only, I suppose, go back to that in another 2 years when the elections happen again, or a year and a half. So for the annual report process, we've got great news, I think, from our side to manage the processes better. By the time we get on the ground for the annual audit, we'll have a audit tool available that we can use to track information submitted by clients and then give feedback on that to say whether we're happy with the information or not. So it will be a very visual tool that we can use to guide the process for both sides. Then also the third one, the District Council to publish its CCO's half-yearly report. So that's just a compliance issue where those reports need to be available, and they've subsequently been published. If we move into the detail, or let's go to the close recommendations. So Council has made a good move to close a lot of the older recommendations. I think 6 out of the 11 was closed, which is fantastic. And then the others that are open or urgent is either actions that have been implemented where the majority of the impact would be felt in the current financial year, or the 2021 audit, where we'll pick those up and hopefully close those. So issues that we raised in terms of the audit plan, we looked at the override of internal controls. We were happy that there were we didn't identify issues. The valuations of property, plants and equipment kept us quite busy. So we've put the detail there of the work that we do in that regard. Quite a lot of detail, especially in the COVID year, then to make sure that all of those valuations are still appropriate as they were done at the beginning of 2019. Make sure that they were correct for the year end. The landfill, we had no issues there. The correct, on page 19, the correct interest rates were used and discount rates. On contract management, I think that was one of the hot topics. So we spent a bit of time looking at that. And I think this also sort of segues into the post or the pre-election report. So big changes in that regard from council, which from management that would have been seen at council meetings, is that there's now biannual budget revisions that's brought to council. So you won't be in the dark, in that specific year in 2019, there were no budget revisions held biannually or brought to council. It was only done at the year end. Management's having monthly meetings. They've got project registers that they've updated, and they're using the new risk and assurance manager to conduct audit reviews on the utilization of the contract management system and report back at the appropriate committees. So I think once you've got all of those actions and you're getting the feedback from the risk and assurance manager that the system is used as intended, it will have the desired consequences. So we'll have a look at that again. Project management, we had a big look at that. There's a lot of actions that has happened in that regard on page 10. A lot of it, once again, that will be only tangible in the year going forward. Wastewater service requests, we didn't identify any issues during the audit for the current year. Page 22 of the board books, solid waste contract with Smart Environmental. We've noted that the new contract has been signed. Council has put resources to specifically monitor the contract.
I'm losing the page numbers because I thought you were talking to the numbers on the report, but the big page numbers.
Sorry, yes, I'm using the board pack page numbers as they were published on the agenda. My apologies. I didn't clarify that.
I've actually just lost about everything you've said because I've been all over the place.
We're on page 22 of the agenda.
Yeah, but on occasions you're referring to the other numbers, and that's what completely.
You may right. That's the point, Gary. Which makes it we stick to the agenda papers for the entirety of the meeting software.
Yep. As far as the pre-election report, we've assessed that as the feedback was given by the Auditor General, and we noted, I think as council has noted in the past, which was dealt with, that there were differences where information came from the LTP and not necessarily actual data, but it was, so I suppose it's just also picking up that the biggest issue was the project overruns, which wasn't picked up earlier because the biannual process of budget adjustment.
Could you slow down? You're like a machine gun. Could you slow down? I really can't follow you.
Apologies.
Thank you, Carl. Loud and clear, good, mate. Thank you.
Doing the management comment at the moment, aren't we? Page 22, is that right? Yeah. 23.
Yes.
And 23.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
And then we didn't identify any issues. If you look at page 24 of the board pack, where we looked at the more public sector focus of the audit as instructed by the Auditor General. In 5.1 on the same page, we noted the issues with the CCO, with the publish of that the half-yearly reports weren't published on TCDC's website. And then the appendixes there have got comments from management on where recommendations are still open. And first one, the overspending relates to project management and the project budgets that we've discussed, contract management and procurement on the next page, detailed comments provided by management. and so on. So, Chair, I'm happy to take comments or questions on the report.
Thank you, Carl. Your report was good and clear, and before we leave it, I want to just go back and make certain we are clear about some of the very positive statements that Carl, as the external auditor, is making about the administration and the financial management of the organisation. But do we have either questions for Carl or for Donna, or points that people would like to make?
I just got to make a point, and I think Carl's hit the nail on the head again, is about the contract management. It's one of the key things we do is manage projects and manage them well. And he's highlighted again that we need to spend some effort on getting this right. So my question is, Carl, is you see the implementation of what your project management system being the way forward, this project online?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
There's some recommendations about how to improve the contract management, and the council's implemented a project management system called Project Online, which provides a tool. Do you see that as being the efficient way forward? Is this the right approach?
I think I've said so. Thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. The system is only as good as the information that goes into it and how people use it. So if the risk and assurance manager and his audits pick up that people are not using the system, then you're going to still probably sit with the same problems. But if these reports come back and say that the system is being used well and all the information is in there and it tracks projects and the appropriate actions is then taken, then the system will work. So unfortunately, as good as the people.
As good as the people, man. We always seem to come around with this project managers, our key thing, doing things for the community in a timely, budgeted way, and we come around this all the time. So,
I'd like firstly for Rob to make a comment.
Thanks. I just want to build on that because it's a good conversation, and I want to acknowledge the positive comments that are in this audit report, because some of these things, project management and contract management, have been around for an awful long time. There's a reason why they've been around for an awful long time, and that is because the fundamental IT systems that we have were not actually very good for the job, and we had to change the foundations of the IT systems to be able to then implement new software systems. So now that we've got to that point, and it's been acknowledged that we've implemented those new software systems, which are only tools. Carl's just made a very good point, and reinforced by you, Terry, that those systems and those processes are only as good as the people that use them. So in that regard, we've substantially beefed up our belts and braces around this whole system. So we now have Paku on board, and Paku is not only putting together the risk management reports with a focus, particularly on these systems that we've embedded, to ensure not only do they remain being the same systems, but we audit the use of those systems to check that the people that are, in theory, using those systems are using them correctly and that the information is correct. So we've got two levels of support just in Paku himself, in terms of both making sure that we're dealing with the risks, but also we are auditing ourselves to check that those risks are being covered off, and you'll see those within those reports that Paku presents. The next level is actually in the management of those staff. We had to work over the last few years to ensure that we did have project managers in the organisation rather than staff that were asked to be project managers. So there's a distinct difference. And we now have a project management team that is largely tasked by experienced project managers, and we're then trying to bring staff through to be the next project managers when those move on. The final layer of, let's call it, protection is, in recent leadership team meetings, our leadership team has discussed about what is our ultimate fallback when things don't go well. With regard to the project and the contract management systems, my instruction at the leadership team meeting was anybody that is in a project management role or a contract management role and they refuse or they don't implement the use of that system in their actions, it will be considered as a serious misconduct. So that is the ultimate backstop that we are implementing through the system. I really don't like the stick approach, but I think because these matters have lain for such a long time within audit reports, and it has taken us such a long time to be able to cross those issues off because of the fundamental changes we needed to make through the organisation, we have to resort to that type of measure within staff performance contracts to ensure that we don't drop the ball from here onwards. And I think that's a really important point to also note.
Thank you.
That's very helpful, thank you, Rob. And I think we traversed this, dare I say, back in October. Bruce knows I'm always going to hassle him over what our capital program is, and of course the contract management and project management systems are pivotal to that. So I think the report has been good, and I would note, Carl, that you've indicated that actually we are primed to go. I suspect that's probably not doing quite credit to where people are at, but in terms of your work, you will be reviewing progress in 2021, and my comment against that was yes, please. Because, thank you, Rob, I'm comfortable that you mean it. You wouldn't be saying it the way that you didn't mean it, and I know that you are. It'll be great to have that external validation that we are actually implementing the system. So that bodes well for essentially the current year and the coming years that are in front of us. Are there other points? Thank you for that very good point, Terry. Other points that people would like to raise? What do I just go back and just note a couple of things, because I think it's actually important for us as councillors. So often we're wanting to know, is something happening? Do we have assurance that something is happening? And our external auditor, as we're going to also discuss with Parku reasonably soon, our external auditor is a really important part of giving us a window in on the operations of management. That, after all, is our role as a committee. So it's worthwhile just to highlight a couple of points which attracted my attention. The first one is on pages 18 of the agenda and 19. And Carl, quite rightly at the start of the audit, said to us, the valuation of our assets is a critical issue. If I could take a quick test, why is it critical?
Why is it critical? Because we need to know.
Why do we need to know the value of our assets?
Well, we borrow off them and they have to be tangible and understood.
Can I say we don't actually borrow off them, we borrow off our rating capacity, but that's not too bad.
Depreciation.
Exactly. So it is giving us a sense of the cost of the use of the asset and how much we should charge the ratepayer each year. We get our valuation wrong, we get our estimation of depreciation wrong, and we have problems. And what we were discussing prior at the start of the meeting about water reform, there are probably a number of councils where we have got those numbers wrong. So if we go to the report, Carl's report is really important, indicating that he has gone through this valuation, the revaluations of our assets. And essentially, if you look at the bullet point, there are upticks on the approach that is taken. And if you go to the top of page 19, I am keen to see assess the reliability of source data and the reasonableness of the assumptions used. So it's only, I think we already had before, the system is only as good as the data we have and the assumptions we employ, and it's passed Carl's test. So well done, Bruce, you and your team. I think that's reasonably important. So we as governors need to take assurance that management have got reasonable control, because it's a reasonable test really that Carl's going to over asset information and their performance. I suspect if we spoke to Bruce, he'd say there's more I want to do, and I suspect there's more he should do, but that's not bad. The other thing there is the second bullet point below that, the one dealing with RAM. RAM's important because it is our connection with our key funding stakeholder in terms of our road through Waka. And again, obviously, Carl's done extensive work through RAM and has confirmed from his perspective that it's suitable. So you're getting the picture. I know I'm labelling it, but actually this is really important for us as councillors. You've got problems about this at the moment, now's the time to raise it. Otherwise, we can go confident in the new year that we've got these sorts of issues under control, and that must be important as you move to consult and ultimately adopt a long-term plan. I'd also like to then, in a similar vein, we've dealt with contract management and project management, which is good. I'm glad we've got that in place, and Rob, you have importantly, we'll come to a Pāku, a process of also validating that in fact we are actually using it, which is superb, and I suspect through the process we will have views from Bruce and his team about its effectiveness and how it's going. I do want to also, from a confidence perspective, look at page 24, and Carl has mentioned this, which is the public sector audit. Again, I would want to say to you as council, this also deals with us, by the way, not just management, but look at what it's saying, is that actually it's negative assurance. So, meaning nothing's come to my attention, I think is the way Carl would put it. But we have complied with our statutory obligations. We are carrying out our activities effectively and efficiently. We aren't incurring waste. We don't appear to have any probity issues. And in fact, we're not operating in an environment where there is a lack of financial prudence. So look at the last thing, our testing identified no issues of concern. Now I'm not going to hold Carl have to find every instance, but that is positive. Right, I know this sounds like a bit didactic, a bit preachy, but can you get it?
Yeah.
We should be taking confidence that Carl and his team have gone through and are giving us reasonable assurance over our management and our behaviour. Don't overstress it, because actually, the sure as you pat yourself on the back, something goes wrong. So don't give up, Pāku, on doing that assurance work that you continue doing. Don't give up on your vigilance, Carl. But this report's really important. And he's also noted, by the way, the other thing, sorry, I meant to mention, and thank you, Don, that a number of the recommendations, which quite frankly have been woefully outstanding, are being closed. And that's tremendous news as well. So I'd like to move to the recommendations, but if I can leave my comments ringing in your ears, I wonder if somebody would like to move the adoption of this report, please. Thank you, Tony. Do I have a second? Thank you, Sally. Put the option, the motion that we adopt the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you, Carl. Appreciate that. Are you able to stay with us, or is LP not a week a meeting?
Chair, I'm torn between the two. I suggest, I suppose my time will be better spent on finishing the LTP audits.
If you wanted to, if I can give you an indication, if you get the chance to stay for the next item, which is Pāku, yep. you may wish to see that, because I think it's reasonably important that you, as the external auditor, hear what our internal auditor has been doing. So, but otherwise, totally understand what otherwise is your normal presence. If you've got to duck away, I know you've got some pressure on.
Thanks, Chair. I'll stay for this one.
Thank you. Pāku, I think we're in your hands, mate. 2 or 3 items here. We are going well for time, so I think we can probably do all 3 of them before we break the morning tea at 10:30.
Okay, Chair, thank you. We're on page 32, which is the risk report, firstly. And it's fair to say I've done quite a bit of work in this area, and it will look a little bit different for you all. I've reviewed the corporate risk register, and I've made some recommendations to kind of take some of those away, because they're being managed effectively. And it also allows us to focus on the risks that are really important, that we need to kind of zero in on, and put better controls in place to manage those risks. So that's part of this. The other thing I've done is I've done a deep dive, and this is what you're going to get over the next 12 months. That deep dive is really important, because it gives you insight into the risk a bit more in detail. But more importantly, it's important for us to tell the story of what we are doing to manage that particular risk. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm at here with this report.
So are there comments you'd like to make actually on your report, Paku, or will I open up questions, comments?
I'm happy to open up for comments and questions.
Okay, so look, here's, so firstly, I think I am wanting to be complimentary of the work that's done, I'll keep saying it for the rest of the meeting. As a committee, I think as we've tried to reform ourselves, we haven't had the chance to sit down and look really at our risks. We started doing that, you might recall, when Paul was still on board, no, Carl was still on board, and it only went so far. So Paku has done us a favour, which is that he's actually looked hard at the risks that we do monitor, and he is recommending two things as far as I can see. One is that actually some risks do not need our attention as a committee, because I think the words were, they are well managed. Now that means that they are not risks, but they can still occur, but they are ones that generally Paku is suggesting that we are comfortable that the mitigations and the controls in place mean that it doesn't need our attention. And then on top of that, he's giving us his recommendation as to what actually are the risks which should worry us, if that's the right word, or keep our focus on in terms of the cycle of meetings that we have as an audit and risk committee. So quite frankly, this has been a much more efficient way to get us to the point where we can look at our risk register and say these are our big risks. So well done. So can I, for the sake of the conversation, to open it up, can I point us firstly to page 34? So in the table there, if I've read this correctly, Paku, you are recommending these 4 risks be removed because they are well managed. I'd like just to focus the committee's attention, point to that and ask, do you have questions? And are you comfortable that what have been some significant matters for us are ones that we won't directly have reported to us because we are saying they aren't the big risks, the top risks that we have to manage?
Yeah, well, number 2, technology has been an issue and raised several times through the system, so it's great to hear that this has now been managed in a way that we can move forward. So I think that's been a great positive move. So yeah, well done on that. I think it's one of the things we've battled over the years, and it's cost a lot of money and direction, and so yeah, appreciate that.
Any other questions folks would like to raise? I was actually interested on that point. Cyber security is one that actually is pretty current around the place. Why are we so confident that actually cyber security isn't, so we say an issue that should be in front of the committee?
Look, I'm fairly confident that our IS manager is managing that risk, and so far as she's connected with the right places, we have really strong cyber controls in place around us. But more importantly, she's abreast of everything, of all the everything that's coming up in this space. So I'm sure she's well connected in relation to that risk and is continuing to keep an eye out for us.
And also we do have an independent cyber security company that does penetration testing and does a lot of work on our systems to make sure that we are secure, and they do regular audits as well on that.
So we've had no instances of actual partial breaches of our system or anything like that. We haven't.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Nobody's been sucked in by a fishing expedition or anything like that. Right? Correct. I mean, these are let's face it, these are the issues that get us We haven't had somebody grabbing a false identity of one of our regular suppliers and changing the bank account details to get money into their bank account and not a valid address, those sorts of things. We've got that on top of those. Sweet. Okay, good.
But that's Chair, that's very real. That's definitely something that could happen.
Okay, you can see I'm smiling a wee bit. I'm happy to take your advice on this one, but I just wanted to reflect, keep that one near your mind, Parker, because it's well done that we're comfortable, we've got that one under control. So I had a very similar sort of question, not about cybersecurity, but about emergency management, business continuity. This is good if it's given it's true, but essentially this would come off because we're comfortable that throughout the organisation we have our continuity plans, processes in place, and they are tested. None, IT being one of them, that being the very least, but actually a whole bunch of other things in place. So we're comfortable that the continuity planning inside the organisation is up to speed.
Yes, Chair. Yes, yes, BCP plans are all in place, and as I say, they've been tested and reviewed and etc. So,
congratulations. That's good. Okay. Yes, you're welcome to.
One of the focuses I had when I arrived here was making sure that we had one group that was looking at both emergency management on the outside and crisis management on the inside. So we have Gary Tower leading that emergency management team, but we beefed up the staff resource so that we have community plans in emergency management aligned with emergency management response plans and group plans. But we also ensured that the internal business continuity plans were aligned to everything we were going to be doing in an emergency on the outside to make sure that no service failed at the same time that we were trying to manage an emergency. And that was a really sort of important step, I believed at the time, to make, that we had a central focus of ensuring that all emergency situations, whether it's internal or external, were coordinated, managed and audited to ensure that we were continually as current as we could possibly be. So because we have an emergency management team that are well practiced, because we do get events on a very regular basis, we were able to, I believe, confidently test that internal emergency crisis management scenario, and hopefully that has been reflected over the past 2 or 3 summers where we have actively planned for what can happen during a summer, because when I arrived here 5 years ago, we always used to have a relatively traumatic time of attending ratepayers meetings or trying to provide services for ratepayers when things were going wrong. And for the last few years, we've actually limited the amount of issues that were deemed a crisis type of scenario, where there was a service failure. And we've actually built that into our annual planning from an emergency and crisis management perspective. And I firmly believe it's working. It's something you've always got to keep an eye on, and I do believe it's working, and it's been reflected in the last 2 or 3 summers that we've had sort of a reasonably calm situation.
So to follow through on that, if we look at Appendix A, there goes the complete list. I think effectively what we're looking at was the big ones that Parker has deleted, but on pages 35 and 36 we have a complete list of risks that Code Green is that actually they are well managed and actually in front of us anything other than saying, well, we've got this covered, guys. Again, I'd open it up to comments from everybody if they wanted to raise any questions at this stage. I'm presuming not. Okay, could you just, though, help by providing us with a bit of advice and direction on the deep dive under Appendix B, which is on page 37 onwards of the agenda, how you'd like us to consider this, please?
Yes. So in terms of the deep dive, it was really important for me to have a look at health and safety. Look, it's really personal. It's as simple as that. And our senior leadership team take this very personally in relation to staff, making sure that staff go home well and safe. So this is one of our next lists. And in doing this review, I needed to look at it from the perspective of what is our current state, what should we be aspiring to, in relation to good health and safety at this council. So I used two areas to really hone in on the things that we need to really address and put our focus towards. And really ACC is the accreditation process is very good, and if we can meet those standards, then we're doing really well in terms of our staff. So I focused on that, and as to that's the benchmark, that's what we want to head to. And in saying that, I broke it down, I looked at all of the associated risk areas. Really hazard management, we need to do this well. This is the core of keeping our staff safe, making sure that we understand what hazards they're faced with. Needed to look at what processes and systems we have in place to support our staff in managing the health and safety hazards that they have. Looking at the information we provide to our staff, is it accessible? Do they understand it easily? And that sort of thing. And looking at the training needs of our staff. I think the other areas, incidents. Are people reporting incidents? And this is an interesting area that we need to make it really easy for people to report those incidents to us. Making sure our employees are engaged in health and safety. It's not the sexiest subject matter to be involved in, but it is something that's really important, right? So that's really important. And also noting that actually we've got a responsibility around PCBUs. That's the contractors that work for us. So just making sure that we understand what they're doing in their space, and that we have good systems in place to actually have that insight into what our contractors are doing for their workers. So that's kind of where I've led this particular piece of work. The other piece of work that I'm interested in making sure we're across is making sure we build those relationships with the likes of WorkSafe, etc. So those were the sort of focus areas, and I've picked out a number of them where we've got actions that we need to put in place to make sure that we're at the level we need to be at to meet that aspired place for health and safety. So it's a plan, and it's a 2-year plan. Health and safety doesn't happen overnight, but I focused on those really key things that we need to get nailed here and now first, and then it's a progressive thing. Because with health and safety, it's a culture change. We're actually changing culture across the organisation, and that takes time. So that's it really.
Thanks, David. So, sorry, if I can just get a real interpretation first, the interior first off the ranks and sort of thing. So, David, if I go to page 37, where you state the overall risk, which is that we haven't provided a safe, healthy and safe environment for our staff, and obviously for our workers, which of course recognises that goes further. I'm always trying to know what PCBU means. It's a person conducting business undertaking. So we are a PCBU in our own right, but when we also have contractors doing work for us, that's worksite is their PCBU, but it is also ours. So the responsibilities the legal responsibilities on us through the Act apply when our contractor is doing work for us. Okay, reasonably simple, but it's interesting to think about how that might have to play out. So if I go back to that overall risk, your current assessment of it is that we are in a high risk status with health and safety.
Yes, we are.
Correct. Okay, no, that's important. I suspect it's not a bad assessment. If we undertake all these subsidiary actions and address these subsidiary risks over the 2 years, what will that make us? What's our target state?
I'll be honest with you, I'd like us to get to moderate.
Yes.
Yeah, because I don't think you can get to low ever.
Right. Okay. So there's an important point. So we have an important program which I suspect, if I don't say it wrong, will dig me in the side of my ribs and say I must conduct, otherwise I feel more liable than ever.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is a question, have we got the money in the budget for this? Which would be important, otherwise there's no point saying, yes, this is the right thing, if we don't actually enable the resource to be available. That's number one. It's a 2-year program, and because of the inherent nature of health and safety, it will remain a moderately high risk for us as an organisation. Right, so the best we can get down to probably is yellow overall, which is that it's a moderate risk. I think that's a sensible position to be. Okay, so here we are. We are at this stage of high. I think that's probably fair. We've got a 2-year program, and it's going to address the subsidiary risks which really come out of the points of focus that Parker has talked about. Terry, you've got a question?
Yeah, just a question, Parker. Really around the people who work from home. What's the risk and what's the responsibilities of council of workers working from home? Where do we fit in that?
Yes. Councillor, that is a risk that we need to manage, and we are doing that well. We have in place guidelines and also leadership responsibilities for their staff while they're working at home. So we put our leaders responsible to check in with our staff to make sure that they have the resources and they are managing their workplace, which is their home base. So yes, we've got processes and controls around them to really manage that. And touch base is really important. Making sure that our leaders touch base with them on a semi-regular basis.
And have you had injuries reported through the working from home situations, has it been?
Not at this point. I haven't seen any that are substantive enough to suggest that there's an issue there. Yeah.
It's actually a good point, Terry. It's an exercise in probably any organisation. We've got to say all councils, but it's actually, let's face it, given what we've learned through COVID, it's any organisation when somebody's working. What happens if they trip over a carpet at home? Hopefully it's a stretch to say it's a problem, but it warrants monitoring. Are there any other questions here for Patrick, please? No? You feel good, Rob? Have we got the resources? Have you got the resources to do this?
Even this last 12 months, we've employed an additional resource, particularly in the health and safety space, to really wrap things up. My view actually is it's not a financial issue. This is a cultural and a training issue. I don't think we have put enough emphasis on getting people to really understand the gravity of what we're talking about here. I believe the major risk actually does lie on the outside with the works that our contractors do, rather than what we do as an organisation in our daily activities. However, that's not to belittle the fact that we all need to be conscious about what health and safety is in this day and age. So yeah, we've ramped it up. We have a 2-year focus on making sure that we get up to that ACC audit sort of partnership program level 2. We don't want to aspire at this point to level 3 because that's where the financial side does really start to kick in and the benefit doesn't necessarily the investment that you make. To achieve a level 2, I think we position this organisation really well for the future, and we will get there in the next 2 years.
Thank you. At the next meeting, and it's not because I want to drag this out necessarily by heads teeth, but I'm wondering if we could address, I always keep forgetting whether it's section 40 or 44 of the Act, because that is the section of the Act that specifically outlines the duties of officers, and all new folk are officers. Okay. It's not sufficient, by the way, for you folk just to have this report to have fulfilled your duties and obligations under the Act. So I think it would be helpful if we added to this, if I could ask for you to come back to us at the next meeting to just help us be refreshed with what are our responsibilities. Because essentially, broadly speaking, it's to plan, it's to understand the nature of our risks. Do we understand the nature of our risks? Number 1. Number 2, to plan, to to actually deal with those. And thirdly is to monitor and verify. There are 6 aspects of diligence that we as officers, potentially in this case also includes Rob, must be comfortable legally that we can put our hand to and say it's okay. So this is a really good start, but I think we could build on that if that's okay, please, Parker, by coming back with that. That would be helpful. Okay. I'm conscious that actually, as I think I raised on the 7th of October, and it might have been too early, that whatever comes out of Whakaari White Island will be seminal for all of us as either councillors, directors, or whatever we do in the government's role. Bear in mind there that it's not just individuals, it's actually organisations that are in front of the board.
Yeah.
So even though, as we know, you don't have the financial penalty of being an elected member, and in effect personally Rob does, that doesn't mean to say you would be away from the eyes of WorkSafe or indeed any form of prosecution. Okay, so if we just add it to it, that would be good. I know that you're going to raise this continuously with us, but I think just on reflection, preparing for me, it would be good if we could just follow up with that, please. I would appreciate that.
It would, however, have to be sort of the case you're talking about, White Island. We would have to have gross negligence.
Exactly.
Because I've been talking recently to former chief of Audit for Health and Safety in New Zealand, and they said that's really the test there is. And councils, I would think, would be pretty unlucky to have to have done something pretty amazingly bad to have that.
Look, a point well made, Gary, and I think that's why I set the precedent, albeit I mean, the test under the Act is that we do all as what reasonably practical. That's different to gross negligence.
Yeah, and that's
but I think the problem that worries me in the area of risk management for us is that there probably is no one act that will either lead to a challenge on gross negligence or not. It will be a series of matters that will give rise to it. And that's the challenge for us, that we each day are laying down a small straw and ultimately the camel's back.
So I'll just make a statement, because Gary's made a good point there, but from my personal experience, and I've had quite a bit of experience in this space, it's only when things go wrong that you actually really do find how incompetent some people or some situations appear to be. And that is really the importance of telling honestly the true stories of things that have happened and the way that they've happened, and have our own people and our contractors understand how these things do happen, because there is a complacency.
Oh, yeah.
And there always has been a complacency, particularly in New Zealand, around this environment. And it's and because, touch wood, fortunately, we don't experience the worst case scenario very often in our lives, but they are life-changing experiences. So I spend a lot of time with our staff in this type of space, educating them that it's not actually health and safety that is the real issue, because we should all be switched on to that. It's the police investigations that occur and take 2 years to finish before they even get into that expose where we haven't done a good job or where we've dropped the ball on process. And again, I'm working with Paku and our resource around that to just heighten that level of awareness, because it's such an important area that we just deal with too complacently in New Zealand.
Yes, Terry.
Yeah, I can just add to that. The other day, Veolia came to a call out, and I just see it here too. The guy came in and said hi and took a photo of the situation. That was a great step forward in understanding what's going on, because they've got something to go back to. I thought that's a great step. So, good contractor thing to do, I think.
Good. And that's actually ultimately very important to share, because actually this goes back to my point that when Whakaari comes back to us with the next paper, it will be that we are aware.
Yes.
I think that's really critical. So it probably is important that we see where that goes. So Parker, that's very helpful. Really started to get us on the line of thinking and looking at risks, so well done. We've still got a good way to go, you know that as well as I do, but this is really helpful. So can I move to the recommendations then, please, that are on the bottom of page 32 of the agenda, which is firstly that we received the report and we will provide feedback. Sorry, I haven't done that. Is there any feedback we'd like to give? Parker, one of the things I would like is actually what is that target state of risk put there on any of the risk information that we're coming. That actually the environment for people at the current state, our actions would give us a planned state of being moderate depth. Residual risk. Residual risk is the other thing that we call it. Well, arguably at the moment the residual risk is high, and we should be staying with that note. Doesn't matter. But I'll take the point on that. My God, teach me a few things, I'm sure. Yeah, Martin, sorry, you got a point to make?
Yeah, I just wanted to check something, and I'm not sure if this is the.
Go for it, mate.
I guess it's probably within this. But at our last meeting, we had a report from Donna that was a risk update that had the list of 11 strategic risks.
Yes. That's right.
But I can't see any reference to that in this agenda, and I'm just wondering, has that now been superseded, or is it just
very good, very appropriate question. I was going to talk to Parker about that afterwards, but Parker, you give us the lead there, please.
No, that hasn't been dropped. That will, and it'll appear next time. So I'll make sure that that's in the report.
Right.
The remaining strategic risks, because those are the ones that we're going to be focused on doing a deep dive on. So, right, they'll continue.
Thank you.
And again, I would be, Martin, what I'd be looking for from Parker is that we have the current state assessment and which through the residual risk. We can start with the risk, I suppose, but we get to the residual risk and then we want to go with it. So that's
I was just sort of, considering that was what, 7th of the 10th, it's just a little bit slightly concerned that we won't see that again until another 3 months.
Yeah, fair point. Anything else from folk? Okay, I'll move from the chair that we received the report and we'll note that we have back to Paku. What was a really good first round on the risk. Well, second, please. Thank you, Murray. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? That's carried. Thank you, Paku. That's helpful. Right, we can move on to the second of the 3 reports. Which is the insurance report. The floor is yours, Paku.
Yes, Chair. So I really wanted to put into perspective for you the type of assurance that we wanted to provide here. So in terms of the 3 lines of defence, which is a known model that the Office of the Auditor General advocates for, and in saying that, then off the back of that, I wanted to say what we're going to do in each of those areas or each line. So obviously the first line is self-assurance, where we've got management and internal controls already in place, but it's the second and third lines that are really important, and that's what we will report on here. So that's around having our policies and procedures in place, knowing what those controls are and making sure we're really clear what those are and following those. And then the next one is the independent assurance, which is the internal and external audits and reviews that we undertake. And in saying that, I'm also interested in making sure that you're across our audits in terms of how are we doing in relation to closing out those recommendations, so that you get that assurance that we're focused on that and we're reducing the risk for the council. So yes, I've provided you with the audit review recommendation view, letting you know a bit about the process that we're going to undertake. That's really important. Ownership is really key here in relation to the people that own these particular actions, that they take ownership, they do it, and they do it within a time frame that's acceptable, especially if the risk is really high, and we'll come to talk about that as well. In relation to that, I'll give you a status update and give you some general commentary. The second part of this is I actually undertook a post-implementation review of our contractor management tool during this time period, and I'm in the process of doing the same for the project online tool, which is about to be finalised, and I'll give you that view in the next report. So I've provided you with a brief note of the recommendations for the post-implementation review, and it's fair to say that our staff have underutilised it. However, in saying that, we always look for the root cause of why this has occurred in any audit, and from our perspective, we have 4 things here that in total amounted to why it wasn't used as effectively as it should have done. So, of course, we needed to make sure our bottom line reporting requirements were really well understood. We needed to make sure that we use a consistent contract in all of the contracts that we sign up for. And we had a few, it's fair to say, user issues throughout the period, and these were not resolved. So we didn't go back as an organisation and resolve those quickly so that people were on board with that. And we're addressing that. And the other one is around our planning for this. Planning is really important for any major internal implementation. We need, and also making sure that we have change management involved as well, especially when we're dealing with staff and people. We need to make sure that they are brought along on that journey. So these are the things that I've highlighted in the report, and these are the things that we're going to be addressing. So what we've done in relation to that is we've organised, we have commitment from Bruce's team, the operations team, because they manage this area mostly. And of course our IT team to fix those issues, and of course we have our people and capability people on board. So we're doing, it's kind of like a reset here, is what I'm suggesting, and that's and also we're holding people to account to make sure that they use that tool and we sort these issues out. So that's...
We'll just break there, and Bruce, invite any comment from you. You're the user of this, and we're also looking for you to make certain where it's everything is so, but
yeah, so through the chair, just a couple of comments that I'd throw in there. So of course everything that Paco has said is a real focus for us. We've got 4 main operational contracts across roading, 3 waters, parks and solid waste. The solid waste contract, as we talked about before, is a bespoke contract, so it's not a New Zealand standard contract, and that has caused us a range of challenges over the years, and the other contracts are all NZS contracts, so they're all standard contracts. But the solid waste obviously is the one that's given us a few challenges. That's made it very hard to utilise the software system as well as having the resource to actually kind of drive that stuff forward. So those are just some of the challenges that we've had. Roading and the team are utilising the software now. Parks team will read through a few tweaks and challenges to make sure they can use it. Solid waste is a real challenge around the formatting through rules we'll be following on behind. So yeah, it's key for us. And I think unfortunately we've attracted quite a lot of bad press around contract management, particularly around, I would say, on the solid waste contract, the display contract, and the challenges that we've had for that. If we look at our other contracts, we've actually been implemented and documented those. Now we haven't had a system until this one was implemented, so it's been managed, those contracts have been managed differently in different areas. But with this system, moving forwards, we can try and get some level of consistency across all of our operational contracts to make sure we can have that kind of visibility that we haven't had without going into details.
So let's get a scope of clarity here. This is for our operational, this is for our operational contracts, project management online system to deal with the actual capping speed that we intend to do. Is that correct? Correct. Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you. Good. So this is primary operation. Good. Thank you. Yes. So obviously, any questions, Mark? Go.
Yeah, just sort of under that user issues. Are we confident that the support that's going to be needed from the ITIS group, and if necessary, the financial, any finances that might be needed to get those user issues sorted out, are we confident that that's in place? Because I know, specific, if you've got a system that has issues, people don't use it, and then before you know it, it's it's kind of, oh no, I tried using that once and I didn't get into this, blah, 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 blah. So we're confident that we've got support to be able to get those user issues. There's no point making a recommendation if we then go, oh, we haven't got anything in the budget for that.
Through the chair, we do, in earnest. We have actually an allocated staff member here that is across this from an IT perspective. So any issues in terms of the provider can be sorted, or any issues with the system can be sorted very immediately. So yes, we'll put resourcing into it. Thank you.
So from a process point, Parker, this may be helpful for Martin, it will be helpful for me. So you've done the post-implementation review, makes sense. Rob, I've heard very strong, endorsement from you on the approach. We've even heard about the stick. We have to go beyond the carrot. And we've got this post-implementation review, 4 key recommendations going to come out. How does that then get followed through on? Like, really what I say is, what is your assurance program on that? Because I take it this gets picked up by you at some point in the future, and we're not just relying on Carl as our external auditor who said he's going to come back and look at this.
No, so if we go back to the previous audit review recommendation process, this review will pop into that.
Of course, yes.
And then, so any review we do here at council will pop into our review recommendation process, and we will be following up and monitoring that.
Okay, so Folk, got that? Sorry, I've asked another question which I should have known the answer to. Folk, can people get that? This is to me really important actually. We're not even talking about risk, but Parker's given us a line of sight about how we are internally checking that actually things we know are important, contract management being one of them, is actually going to be real for us. So your good review is going to come back in this report. We're going to see this table of recommendations or actions on a meeting by meeting basis, correct?
Yes, correct.
That's good. That's good. Yes, Sally.
Can I just ask a question how this fits with the smaller contracts? Like, I absolutely understand what you're saying, Bruce, about the majors, but in terms of credibility outside of this organisation, sometimes it's the smaller projects, not just creating the vibe, that we can get burnt on around. So is there any link with that, or are they still manager dependent, etc.?
So I'll jump in that one. So through the chair, yes, we are tightening up that stuff, but obviously most of those are around the project management side of it, operational contract management. If you look at the Zycus tool, the work you have to go through to get a contract and all the requirements into the tool are substantial. So by the time you've done all that, the project will probably finish.
Right.
A little one.
Okay,
so
cool. I just wanted to get the...
So it's not right sized for those kind of projects, for managing the contracts associated with those projects. So that sort of thing is more on the project online, project management side. And that's following good basic project management, but using that project online tool, which Parker mentioned before, as a place where you've got everything recorded, you can manage your milestones, you can track your expenditure, and you
okay, cool. Thank you.
So through the chair, I have got as I said, I'm doing a post-implementation review for the project online tool, and that's the tool where those smaller parcels will land.
Great, thank you. Any other comments then about the paper or advice or lead you need from Spoken?
Yeah, through the chair, I just want to mention that the other part to this assurance is actually the procedural development and review scan that I undertook as well. And this is around how well we're mapping all our processes, because that's really important as a second line defence for us. And we have seen a gap there that we need to fill. So we've engaged a 12-month contractor to come in and fill that gap basically, and put a plan in place for the next 12 months, identifying really important key processes that need to be met so that we de-risk those processes and yes, so that's all in tow as well.
Can you give us an indication of what sort of processes might get captured by this that we haven't got back?
Look, it could be a finance process, it could be an operational process such as how we process, generally not in the consents area because they need to be really strong, but it might be a process how we deal with a customer or complaint, for example.
Yeah.
So it's those sorts of processes that we're looking at.
There's something that I'm pretty hot on at the moment as a direct example, and that's repeat complaints.
Yeah.
We have an RFS system, but at the moment we don't track repeat complaints, so we just track complaints. I would like to know about repeat complaints because it gives a strong indication as to performance across the organisation. So that's a process that I say, look, we need a process to, if we don't already record that this is a repeat complaint, we need to get a process to record it as a repeat complaint. So that's a very specific example of the type of things that we're trying to develop. And so we're using dashboarding within the various businesses and council to ensure that as a leadership team we can hone in on that level of detail to start helping Parking with the focus for which processes are currently under represented in our dashboarding system.
Great, thank you. Anything else, Patrick, at this point? Right, well, that's really helpful. Thank you again. As I said, assurance is the other side of risk for us, which is actually the Patrick's given us an insight into how management is actually operating. I welcome that view. So could I move us to the recommendations, please, which are on page 40 of the agenda. And would somebody prepared to move we received the report? John, and I've got it up and hand over there to seconding, just to check whether any comments we need to give back to Parkhill on the form of the reporting. I think there's a sort of nods around that this is helpful, including both also the implementation information you've given us. So in that case, subject to John and Martin being happy, I will put the motion that we receive the report and that we provide feedback. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Well, I put the cassette on my timetable, Parker, and I said we'd be done by 10:30. We aren't, but I would like to take a break for 10 minutes. Both deserve that. We had a good start to the meeting. Thank you very much for your attention. And enjoy a break and a cup of tea. And we will reconvene at 4:02.